Yes, you guys, welcome back. I'm Nini FC. This is Blue Lines TV, and today I'm joined by two very special guests in football therapy and Joe Tweedie as well. And this is going to be a two-part series. We're going to be discussing and analysing Frank Lampard. We're going to be talking about three main topics today. They're going to be Lampard's patterns of play. We're going to speak about Lampard's signings and why they're not integrating properly too. And we're going to be giving our personal reason, one key reason behind why we feel Lampard is not doing well, and that one key mistake that he's making. So, of course, you guys, Jan, Joe, how you doing? Say hi to the people real quick.
Hey, people.
Also, hey, people.
Hey, I mean, nice, official,
To the
quick.
point.
Let's go. And, we've got more important things to speak about. Starting with the first one, and I want to start with you, Jan. What is the one key mistake that you think Lampard has been making this season that's played, a massive part in regards to why we're starting to fail a bit?
Okay, yeah, so it is, I'll sort of expand on it, but it does boil down to one point. This is something I just put on Twitter that I was thinking about actually just earlier this afternoon. Last season, right, Lampard did demonstrate some tactical acumen. It's not like this guy's just suddenly off the street and having a poor few months in management. He obviously has a lifetime of experience in football as well at the highest level. I know that I'm just sort of regurgitating other things that have been said, but last season Frank employed probably about 3 different systems and ultimately successfully, considering the conclusion of the season. It's like beating big teams. Yes, we haven't beaten big teams this season, but we beat Liverpool last season, we beat Manchester City last season, we did the double over Tottenham last season, a win and a draw against Arsenal. So he's shown he can do it. He employed a back 3 system when necessary, depending on the opponent. It was all there. He was getting praise. The season started well, he was getting loads of praise, but suddenly the issue, and you posing the question to me, Nini, it's currently not working. It looks pretty disastrous. He looks devoid of confidence and out of his depth. Whether he is out of his depth in terms of the job itself, ultimately moving forwards, and in its entirety, I'm not 100%. But at the moment, that's how he looks, and he looks low on confidence, as do the players. Now, what I was thinking is, to answer your question, to sort of round up to that, is we bought loads of new players, right? Excellent players. We have an excellent squad. But one important thing to note about all these players that we have, the ones we had and the new ones we've got, is they're completely different in regards to their player profile. And that's not a bad thing. But if you compare our 3 wingers, you've got the pacey, on the shoulder, Christian Pulisic. You've got Callum Hudson-Odoi, the sort of tricky playmaking winger that wants to carry the ball into the box and take a shot. And then you've got Hakim Ziyech that might come, a little bit deeper and play long diagonals to the far post in terms of long distribution. More of a sort of Fabregas playmaker in that sense, a little bit, or a hybrid winger. 3 incredibly different wingers. Similarly with our strikers, Giroud and Timo Werner couldn't be further apart in terms of player profile, and then Tammy, you could argue, somewhere in the middle. They're all so different, and I could continue going on throughout the squad in terms of midfielders. What Frank Lampard's doing is he's trying to really hammer home this 4-3-3 that looks like it really worked at one point in time when we went on that unbeaten run of 17 games when Havertz and Mount were in the 8s, and it seemed right. And I think he's perhaps naive in this sense, thinking, right, that's what we do. And then he's bringing all these players that were perhaps injured at the time that have come in, and they're all so different that then you're not going to get the same results in this formation when you're chopping and changing these new players. So I think that's a huge issue. I like his idea. I think the 4-3-3 is the way to go ultimately at the highest level in the Premier League. But with all these different players, because they're so different, you have to cater to them differently. And I think that's the biggest issue at the moment for me. I understand why he's doing it in terms of previous success. But with these, immense talents that are also different, trying to shoehorn them into this thing that seemingly worked is frustrating. And I don't want to say that Lampard is limited to doing that, because he's shown before he's willing to change. But at the moment, that seems to be the issue for me.
Okay, that's a really interesting take on things. Of course, these players can fulfill so many different types of roles, and maybe Lampard can fall victim to, trying to find many different styles and systems to try and shoehorn them in and get them playing. And you know, I can see how that can become an issue as, you know, times go on, especially when there's not enough time really to, you know, work on these things consistently in the training ground. So of course, Joe, I'm going to ask you the same thing. What is that one key mistake that you feel that Lampard's making? And if you want to elaborate on what Jan said, of course, you know what to do.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point from Jan. I think the kind of offshoot of having so many different kind of managerial styles over the past couple of seasons is that you have this sort of hodgepodge of different kind of players, different kind of styles who suit different kind of systems. And therefore, when someone isn't on form, when someone's not fully fit, trying to sort of do one-for-one swap-ins, you're not really kind of going to get the same exact kind of execution of the system that you're trying to implement. So, you know, Kova and Kante both play that right central midfield spot in a 4-3-3 completely differently. Havertz plays it entirely differently. Matt will play it differently. You know, and good squads tend to have, I don't want to say like the exact same kind of players, but they have similar profiles in that they can execute the roles pretty similarly, or at least to a degree that makes them an option. You know, and I think Jan highlighted that perfectly. When you look at the forwards that we have a traditional target man. We have Tammy, who's kind of a mobile target man, and then Werner, who is kind of an on-the-shoulder kind of striker. How you play with those guys up front as attacking midfielders, as fullbacks, as midfielders is entirely different. And chopping and changing and switching week to week, not necessarily week to week, but we've seen a lot of variation in that. It's very difficult to build up a sense of chemistry or rhythm in how you play, how you attack, how you really kind of connect as a team. And I think so many of these kind of squad differences that Jan has highlighted that make it difficult, I think, and I don't care how much experience the coach has potentially who comes in and replaces Lampard, or Lampard himself with little experience. That's quite a difficult thing to navigate, because you may have one way of playing that suits maybe 12 players, but you have a squad of 25. And then try to sort of cater for, as I said, injuries, form, whatever it's going to be. It's difficult to put 4 or 5 players in that team who can't execute the roles as well. I often feel that we're not as good a team when we don't have Reece James and Chilwell playing at the peak of their powers. I don't think they played particularly well against Leicester. I think they're still feeling the effects of injury, but also I think that the guys that they're playing ahead of them are chopping and changing. The centre-backs are changing. You can't really build that kind of chemistry and sort of flow. So yeah, I mean, I completely concur with that. I think the thing on top of that, and I know it's something that I've mentioned on one of your streams before, is that I feel that for the way that Lampard currently sees football, the way that he wants to execute the game, the levels of fitness and conditioning that the team need are astronomical. And I think it's certainly things that we saw with Pep, we saw with Klopp, how they changed their pressing triggers, how they changed the way that they kind of try to recover the ball. And I think Lampard is going through that phase now where I think when we are 100% fully fit, completely out the races, everyone's fresh, actually that first team we actually play pretty decent football. I'm thinking back to maybe Burnley and some other performances this season.
Sevilla as well,
Sevilla, Rennes, etc., where we actually look pretty good. But that style of football for me, and I think this is probably where it comes into the training side of things, I don't think it's necessarily sustainable over the course of the season. We've seen Pochettino, Spurs kind of burn out towards the end of the season. We've seen a lot of these teams have to change the way that they kind of defend. Klopp is probably the big. I mention him a lot because I think he's probably the biggest, maybe the best example of a coach who has really evaluated the league that he's in and kind of changed his coaching philosophy to fit the fact that he chooses his moments to press, he chooses his moment to trigger that press, and rather than sort of this all-out insane press that we've seen Pep come with, Klopp come with first of all. So I think it's a little bit for me that this kind of way that Lampard is playing. He's sort of treading in kind of, you know, footsteps that have been trod before by better managers at the moment, your Klopps, your Peps, etc. And the connection to training for me is the big thing. I think we overtrain. I think the team's workload isn't managed particularly well. And the biggest, I think, probably, I would say that, maybe the biggest, you could say, reason or the biggest outcome of that is that I think when we have like a real significant amount of time to prepare for a game, 5 days, 7 games, 5 days or 7 days, we look very tired in those games. The more time we have to prepare, I think the less actually fresh we look, the less sort of cohesive we look. So that for me, I think probably the one thing to look at is training practices, the work, you could call it workload management, because I think at the moment, unless you're Mason Mount, who to me seems like he could run a marathon every day, the rest of the squad, you know, they cannot play this 100-mile-per-hour pressing game, 100-mile-per-hour attacking game, this kind of insane Energizer Bunny football. You know, that probably Lampard is looking at as a way of sort of winning games. And it's also critical for me that I think he often talks about like outworking teams, outrunning teams, and that for me shouldn't always be the the kind of barometer of what a good performance should be. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect in the way that they're coached in terms of how they're training, how tired players look. But then, as I say, that kind of build up to when we eventually do play, the fact that when we have a lengthy period of time, when there's lots of work on the training ground, we don't ever appear that fresh. And I think maybe it's the Arsenal game where we played them recently. The first 15 minutes of that game, I don't think I've seen a Chelsea team look that flat in a very, very long period of time. And, you know, there's been other games this season where we've had like a long period of time to prepare for, and we just look dead for the first 15-20 minutes of the game. So yeah, I mean, it's conditioning. You could say workload management, but if that's the one thing, it's that connection between like what he currently sees as his playing style, high press, intensity, with training. I don't think that meshes for me. So yeah, that's the one thing that I think at the moment is the biggest cause for concern, is the workload of the players.
I think you guys, I think we're starting to build a bit of an overarching picture here in regards to the issues coming, because I feel like all our points are going to complement. My reason I feel with Lampard is I feel like he doesn't pick his battles well enough. Like you were saying, Joe, playing this style of football, this emphasis on the high intensity, pressing from the front, in a season like this where, you know, I feel like there's a reason why we're seeing a lot of clubs maybe not playing within themselves, but adapting to the demands of, you know, COVID affecting the season. It is a bit unrealistic at times to constantly expect this type of high intensity left, right and centre when it's just not feasible. And after the game last night, Pulisic was interviewed saying that we won't blame the defeat down to the system. Us, the players, you know, we understand it, you know, we like it, but it's more a case of fatigue. And of course that plays a massive part. I think, as Jan was saying, the amount of different players who provide different components in the team, you know, constantly having to find ways to rebalance them on top of what you're saying, Joe, in the sense that it's very hard for the intensity to be maintained consistently. And on top of that, with what I'm saying too, with Lampard not picking his battles, yeah, there's so many prime examples. I think the game versus Man City really screams out to me, because, you know, it wasn't the game really to test out that style of football against a Man City team, but right now, you know, you want to maintain the confidence. You want the confidence to be high, because at least if you get a result or, you know, play with passion, at least you can take that forward into the next games and, you know, manage how you play a lot more. But even what you're saying, it's quite funny, because the game versus Leeds, I know everyone with the stats were everywhere, we outran Leeds, and I was thinking at the time, there's a reason why no other team really has to outrun them to beat them, you know? There's a massive reason behind that, and it just felt like we got a bit too carried away. We play with this youthful exuberance, which I think maybe comes from the manager, and when people talk about lack of experience, I've always been thinking, what does that actually mean? But, you know, looking at Lampard's personality and certain decisions he makes, I think last night it really summed it up even more. The final 25 minutes we played with no control, basically, because Lampard wanted to force something to happen in the game. He wanted to force a reaction, and, you know, playing two strikers up front in Tammy and Werner, who haven't really played together, who are kind of making the same runs, where ideally, you know, you want one of these guys needs to have someone to play off in a Havertz. So then, you know, you kind of really disrupted the entire flow of things, you know, forcing a system which in theory and on paper will work, but considering the difficulties this season with fatigue, it's not going to work. And look at Reece James. I think he hasn't looked the same for the past few weeks, clearly carrying that little knee knock still. And, you know, if you're not going to find a way sometimes in these games to pick your battles, you know, Leicester, Man City could have been games they play on the counter, revert back to the old Chelsea spirit. Let these young guys, these new signings, so, you know, guys like Werner and Kai have had their little, you know, their winter break back home. They're here now where they've got no time really to do anything. And, you know, they're expecting a miracle to happen with them in terms of then adapting to the intensity of the Premier League as well. I feel like...
Can I pick up on something you said, Danny? Yeah, because I think it's a good point. I totally agree. I understand you don't have to press Leeds to beat them. But at the same time, I kind of do condone that approach in that game, because I think there's an element of, if you outrun them, this Leeds team, you've got the quality to win. I do think there's a place for this high octane football applied in certain games. I'm in total agreement with both of you. Pick your battles. Again, the game against Leicester, I think one of the what you said, Nini, to your point about controlling the game for a moment and just getting your foot on the ball and taking a deep breath. I would have quite liked to see a Billy Gilmore come in to the midfield and try and dictate. And I think a lot of Chelsea fans would have probably liked to have seen that as well.
Yeah, I mean, final 25 minutes, you've got Gilmore dictating things, applying that intensity even more to Leicester.
Put your foot on the ball, make them run a little bit, wait for that little moment of frustration through one player, and then pick your pass. But that comes with confidence, and devoid of confidence at the moment. But I do think there is a place for high octane. Like, if you look at Bayern Munich in their pomp, they are relentless in terms of how they press you. They play a really high line, which recently has been a bit flawed for them. But ultimately, they were the pinnacle of successful football in Europe, and there is a space for it, but it's just a bit of like streetwise now, when to come off it. Like Joe said, again, it is the best example, Jurgen Klopp, because the heavy metal football, to this, to that, to it wasn't even like, Joe was right about him evolving the technical aspect of his tactical approach in terms of the pressing triggers are different. It's no longer just friggin' run around all the time and press and freak out, and then everyone loses their confidence. It's like, it's probably a little bit more sort of like intellectualized pressing triggers or whatever. But even prior to that, because that's almost like a more recent evolution. Prior to that, Liverpool had we scored loads of goals, but then they weren't really defensively resolute, and then they went forwards. Then they sort of became whole. That's kind of like what Frank Lampard did. He kept comparing Chelsea to Liverpool early doors. Really good at attacking last season, scored loads of goals. You bring in Thiago Silva, Ben Chilwell. We were defensively resolute, and then he thought that would happen almost organically as well. But I think there's just a lot of stuff in between that we missed for that, and as a result of that, rather than developing on the training pitch, coming out of it and getting through the teething issues, there's been this collective psychological frailty that's from management, understandably, because of his lack of experience, and then that's obviously gone down to the players, and because of the sort of climate with the pandemic, it's not been a really good environment to pull yourselves out of that. So there needs to be a little bit of understanding and compassion. Understanding and compassion won't keep a man in the job if results are bad forever, but it's just there's a large unfortunate nature about it. I kind of, just to go on a quick tangent, I kind of do back Frank to be smart enough to just see what's going on. I think he hasn't backed himself to change things, and he sort of backed himself into a corner a little bit with his tactics. But I liked Anthony Barry coming in. Frank spoke about him recently. We're obviously so much better at scoring set pieces and corners. I think until recently, we're much better defending them as well, because there was a time we were just shipping every goal from every corner.
Center,
exactly, and we got a lot better with that. Obviously, Pulisic with a 2v1 on the Leicester corner didn't cover us in glory, but maybe that comes down to the frail psychological thing, which might be the biggest issue right now.
Yeah, I fully agree.